This lecture is on the topic, An Empire of Freedom, and the focus question here is, what were the meanings of British liberty in the 18th century? Although slavery was vital to the British Empire, the British people in the 18th century believed theirs was the most free and advanced nation in the world. Great Britain was the world's greatest commercial and naval power, and had a complex government with a powerful parliament representing the interests of a landed aristocracy and merchant class. London, the political, cultural, and economic capital of the empire, was the largest city in Europe with nearly 1 million residents. The empire enjoyed a common law, common language, and despite small numbers of Catholics, Jews, and Africans, a common devotion to Protestantism. Britain often found itself at war with France, which replaced Spain as its European Catholic rival. This stimulated a large military establishment, high taxes, and a Bank of England to help finance its wars in Europe and the Empire. These wars helped develop a sense of national identity forged against common foes. Britain was celebrated by its people as a nation with a rapidly expanding economy that united both Britons and colonists. Especially in contrast to France, individual liberty, the rule of law, and the Protestant faith were all points of British pride. Liberty, especially as it was embodied in what came to be called the British Constitution, was central to this emerging British identity. Britons believed that the legacy of the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution had bestowed upon them a unique and ideal political order of institutions that guaranteed their freedoms: the rule of law, legislation consented to by representatives, restraints on arbitrary authority, and individual rights such as trial by jury enshrined in the common law. Writers in mainland Europe looked to England as a model government, and thinkers such as French political philosopher Baron Montesquieu praised Britain for its balanced constitution, in which the House of Commons, the House of Lords, and the King checked one another's power. In Great Britain, no man, not even the king, was above the law, and Britons believed their political system prevented the tyranny, popery, and barbarism that they believed enslaved others elsewhere in Europe and the world. On both sides of the Atlantic, every political cause, it seemed, wrapped itself in the language of liberty and claimed to be defending the rights of Englishmen. With the presence of slavery in the empire and large portions of the population disenfranchised, liberty was hardly universal within the British realm. But British notions of liberty were practiced through various forms of participation beyond the directly political, whereby even those who could not vote influenced public life. Ideas of British liberty expanded beyond the political nation, or those who voted, held office, and engaged in structured political debate, to all members of British society, including laborers, sailors, artisans, and even slaves. Liberty came to mean more than just privileges derived from membership in a distinct social class. It became defined as a general right to resist arbitrary government, and ordinary people invoked liberty and critiqued tyranny in collective actions, sometimes against merchants charging above a just price, or officers of the Royal Navy engaged in impressment, kidnapping poor men in public for service on the Navy's ships. Liberty was central to two sets of political ideas in the Anglo-American world. Today, they are called republicanism and liberalism by scholars, but they were not used in this way at the time. Republicanism celebrated participation in public life by economically independent citizens as the basis of liberty. Republicans believed that only citizens who owned property had virtue, defined as the willingness to subordinate self-interest to a common public good. In 18th century Britain, this body of thought about freedom was most closely associated with a group of critics of the established political order known as the Country Party, because much of their support arose from the landed gentry. Country Party publicists John Trenchard, Thomas Gordon, and others had little impact in Britain, but their ideas were heavily favored by the elites of the American colonies, who associated land ownership with liberty and political power as a danger to that liberty. Liberalism in the 18th century British Empire meant something quite different from liberalism as it is defined today. While republicanism had a public and social quality, liberalism was individual and private. John Locke was liberalism's leading philosopher, and his two treatises of government, written in 1680, were very influential in the 1700s. Locke argued that governments were constituted through a social contract mutually agreed to by equals, in this case male heads of households, in which these individuals surrendered part of their right to govern themselves in order to enjoy benefits of the rule of law, security of life, liberty, and property. Protecting these spheres required limiting the interference of the state in religious, family, and economic life. Lockean ideas of individual rights, the consent of the governed, and the right to rebel against unjust or oppressive government became familiar in Britain and its colonies. Nevertheless, Locke's idea of liberty as a universal right seemed to exclude many from its benefits, as its imagined free individual was, in both theory and practice, the propertied white man. Republicanism and liberalism, while distinct bodies of thought, overlapped and reinforced each other, and both came to influence and inspire Americans who came to resist the rule of the British Empire.